300 years ago, Sir Thomas More invented the word utopia, where everything was going to be hunky-dory. But now we know it's going to be a green-powered Earth, and that'll be solartopia. Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
Well, we bit that apple and the garden was lost, and so we had to work to pay the cost. And so we went digging into the ground and started to burn many things we found. But
don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
Well, we multiplied, we needed more. The rich got rich, the poor got sore. The fuel ran scarce, the price jumped high, and so they gave nuclear power a try. But
don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
But the nuclear plants were built in haste, with too many risks and no place for waste. And so from Seabrook to Shoreham town, we have to shut those new plants down. But
don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
Now we're fighting wars over oil and gas. No matter who wins, it will not last. The earth is scarred, the planet is warming. Don't you think that all of it's a great big warning?
Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world? We'll learn to power houses and cars from the light that's made up in the stars. It's a gift to share that's always been given. It falls down to earth like rain from heaven. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
one more time.
Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia, solartopia, solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a solartopia all over God's green world?
Well, welcome everybody. We only have Bill McKibben for the first 30 minutes or so of this, so we're going to get started right away with a conversation I'm going to have with Bill. I just want to encourage you, if you have questions that come up, or if you come to this meeting with questions, to put them into the chat. And I don't know if Bill will have enough time to respond to those, but I'll do my best to. I'm Jim Antal, by the way. I'm with United Church of Christ as the Climate Justice Advisor to our General Minister and President. And Bill hardly needs any introduction for this audience, but I think you all know that he's a writer, a teacher, an activist, a leader, and a visionary. One of the founders of 350.org and the founder of Third Act. And we are the expression of Third Act known as Third Act Faith. So Bill, welcome. It's good to see you.
So good to be with you and everybody else. And so good to hear that song. You know, Pete Seeger was a good friend of mine, and just watching that makes me wish that he was with us. There's a voice that we could use right now in this world. And while we're on the topic of voices that we've lost, this is the crew that I'd like to just acknowledge the passing of Art Waskow with Reb Arthur died last week, and he's someone I've known and worked with for a very, very long time, and I miss him. So, um, um, good spirit in the room, just thinking about them both.
Thank you for naming them both, Bill. And this is what inspires us. It inspires us to go beyond what we think we're capable of. Um, God knows the times I was with each of them, it helps you to discover new possibilities and callings, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, folks here, I'm sure were participants in last month's Sunday events.
Of course.
I was in Boston with about 1,000 of my best friends. And so tell us where you were, Bill, and also just share some of the highlights from
Well,
the hundreds of events.
I was in New York City, where we had a spectacular, a number of things happened in New York, but that afternoon we had a kind of wrap up thing down in Lower Manhattan, and had the historic Quaker Meeting House was actually the venue, and we had many, many, many people crowded in. Brad Lander, uh, city comptroller, was there, as well as the U.S. senator from the state of Vermont, and a lot of really interesting people. And we were just kind of bringing together the news from all over the country and the images from all over the country. 500 and some events spread out across America. Just beautiful, beautiful, mostly mostly joyful moments from everywhere. It's rare enough this year that we've had chance for really joyful moments. And of course, we had to reconvene, last week for No King's Day and all of that, all important. But it was great to have that beginning. And I think it's pretty clear that it went so well that there's going to be a kind of uh, global expression of the same thing next year. So what we got started will keep growing, I think. Uh,
Well,
one of the things
you're
that
such a
makes me,
visionary, Bill. The placement of it at the equinox
yeah,
was extraordinary, I
well,
thought.
fun. And one of the things that really made me happy is I know that along with those 500 events, I know that there were another 500 sermons preached that Sunday morning, because people have sent me copies of an awful lot of them, and they're beautiful. So and I think that has a lot to do with the good work that you all did, getting faith communities wound up about it all. So
Well,
many,
you did
many
some good
thanks.
work getting people wound up also with your new
Yeah,
book, huh?
there you go.
So share with us a few more of the more amazing and hopeful stories and even statistics, whatever you choose that you
Yeah,
put together in that book. But the one thing really want to be sure you talk about is Pakistan.
sure. Um, So, the book is oddly for me hopeful, and it was designed just to let people know that amidst the many big bad things happening on our planet right now, there's one big good thing happening, and it's this very sudden, stark surge in clean energy, really a product of the last 36 months or so around the world. And there are parts of the US that are participating in this full on, California and Texas, sort of chief among them. But you really have to be in much of the rest of the world to really see the full impact of it. China is the epicenter, and they're putting up clean energy at an almost unbelievable pace. In May, China was putting up 3 gigawatts of solar power a day. So a gigawatt's the rough equivalent of a big coal-fired power plant. So one of those going up every 8 hours, made out of solar panels. Okay. Um, um, but yeah, I think maybe the most beautiful story in the book is about what's happening right next door to China in Pakistan. Pakistan, as you know, has been brutalized by climate change. No place hit harder. The two worst floods since Noah in 2010 and 2022. In the summer now, in many of its cities, the temperature routinely reaches into the 120s. Um, but its one geographic advantage is this border with China, across which has begun to pour the imports of cheap solar panels. Pakistan has expensive and unreliable electric grid, so it was an easy sell for people there. And so they've put up huge amounts of solar, not the government and not in big solar farms, mostly just on the top of, if you go look on Google Earth and study Lahore or Karachi or Islamabad, you just see every building now, every warehouse, every mini mall, every factory, solar panels all over the roof. People basically figured out, off of YouTube and TikTok how to snap these things together. Farmers have been very early adopters. Uh, those of you who've traveled in rural Asia know that a legacy of the Green Revolution of the 60s was the deep tube wells, irrigation wells across that part of the world. They've always run on diesel pumps, but diesel is expensive for farmers. So they were eager to get these. Often they lacked the money to build the sort of steel supports to where they just laid the solar panels on the ground. And Pakistani farmers using about 35% less diesel last year than they did the year before, as they replace it with sunlight. And that's a big difference in somebody's income who's in a marginal, farming role. Now, in the last 6 months, what happened in Pakistan seems to be starting to play out at scale across much of Africa. Pretty much any place where there are good Chinese trade routes, which is most of the developing world. And now it's not just the panels and things and batteries, it's also the stuff that goes with it. So EVs and e-bikes pouring out of China and into the developing world in particular. They'd be pouring into here too if we didn't tariff them out of existence, because the best and cheapest cars in the world now come out of China. Detroit, sadly, is no longer the kind of center of absolute automotive excellence. Now it's a few cities whose names I find it hard to pronounce in China. So much, much going on across the planet.
So, Bill, I've got two quotes from your excellent book that kind of connect with each other. And they're both brief. I'll just read them. And if you'd care to comment, that would be great. The first one concerns our best hope. Our best hope for a new civilization, one that looks up to the sun every day as the star that fuels our world. And then the second quote concerns our biggest challenge. I have little doubt that we will run the world on sun and wind 40 years from now. But if it takes us anything like 40 years to get there, then it will be a broken planet. Our energy sources will hardly matter.
Yeah. So second one first. Look, this is the problem, obviously. If we had, if we had, if we didn't face the climate crisis, then we could just let economics kind of do its thing. And over the next decades, we would get where we're going because eventually, economics works. It's a sort of solvent that does its thing. The fact that this is the cheapest power in the world will eventually prevail. But eventually is not a great deal of help if, before that happens, the jet stream and the Gulf Stream and whatever have collapsed, which is now what we're edging on up to. So our job is to figure out how to catalyze this reaction, how to force the spring, as a gardener would say, how to make it go faster than it otherwise would. And that's doubly true in this country, where we're not facing just the kind of inertia that always accompanies things, but a concerted, concentrated effort by the fossil fuel industry working through the administration to slow down or stop this transition, which is really devilish work, I must say. Diabolical to watch them shut down work on 80% complete wind farms off the coast of New England, or to last week shut down work on the what would have been the biggest solar farm in the country in Nevada, and big enough to power 2 million homes. One array, there's only 140 million homes in America, so that was more than 1% of all the houses in America would have been powered by that thing that's now closed down. Um, um, so we have a huge amount of work to do. But one of the reasons that we can do this work is not just that it's practically necessary because of the climate crisis, and not just that it's economically sensible because it's cheap. There also is, and this was really the most fun part of writing the book and the most fun part of Sunday, um, I, I think that there's some deep connection between human beings and the sun. Um, we don't know what prehistoric people thought because being prehistoric, they forgot to write it down. But um, but we do know that every pile of stones they left behind, Stonehenge on down, ends up pointing to the solstice or the equinox. Every every mythology, religious tradition that we know about uh, 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 had to begin, you know, by solving, suggesting some solution to this puzzle of how the sun rises over here every morning, crosses across the sky, and somehow returns to the same. So there are an endless number of amazing, great stories about giant turtles and emus that swallow the sun and, regurgitate it the next morning, and, on and on and on, all of which are. And beautiful. Um, um, uh, I stole the title from this book, obviously from George Harrison. And if you go on Spotify, turns out that of all the songs in the Beatles' vast catalog, Here Comes the Sun is by far the most popular, the one that the most people listen to every day. And it's because it's a beautiful and optimistic song in a dark time, but it's also because of that connection to the sun. There turns out there's hundreds of great songs about the sun. Everybody, Stevie Wonder, who just name it, as opposed to, the somewhat shorter list of great songs about fracking, that you can find. So I I think that the sun, which already provides us with warmth and light and via photosynthesis with our supper, that it's now willing to provide us with all the power we could ever want, is a kind of has a kind of poetic resonance to it. Um, and I I love it because that means that more and more communities, every place will be able to take care of its own needs for this important commodity. One of the things that really started pressing in on me as I was working on the book was just a kind of realization of how different the geopolitics of the world would have been in the last 100 years had oil been of trivial value during that period, had we run the world on sun and wind. The number of wars we wouldn't have had to fight, and coups that wouldn't have happened, and assassination attempts, and terrorist plots that never would have been born, on and on and on. Humans are, you know, I mean, all too good at starting wars.
Yeah.
We're all Niebuhrian at some point and recognize those realities. But people are going to have to work hard to figure out how to fight a war over sunshine.
This is a an extension of what you've just said, as I understand it, at least, and that is in your book you talk about farmland and corn and solar panels and agrovoltaics, a new word for some of us. How might these things be connected in a way that will benefit humanity?
Well, I mean, here's an interesting, because people, I think, often worry that it's just going to take up all sorts of land, that we're going to have to, whatever. It's very worth for Americans remembering how much land we already spend on energy. not just the 1 or 2% of our land that's used for oil and gas, which is about as much as we'll need for sun or wind, but the fact that we take, our biggest crop in America, corn, covers 60 million acres. Half of that, 30 million acres, is used for ethanol. We're just growing gasoline. And not very much gasoline. That 30 million acres only provides about 3% of all the energy that America uses. If you took that same 30 million acres and covered it with solar panels, we don't want to do that because we don't, need Indiana stem to stern and solar panels. But if you did, it would produce not 3% of our energy, but about 100% of our energy. This really came home to me. I was in Illinois, and it was a farmer there who was converting some of his cornfield to solar power. So he said, "Look, here's an acre that's still in ethanol. We grow it for ethanol. Every year produces enough to take my Ford F-150, the most popular vehicle in America for the last 45 years, to take it about 25,000 miles. So here's the acre next to it, which we've converted to solar panels, produces enough electrons in a year that it'll take my Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the EV version of exactly the same truck, not 25,000 miles, but about 700,000 miles." And he said, "I don't have to pour nitrogen and phosphorus on my solar panels to make them work. I don't have to strafe them with herbicides and pesticides. And I'm left with half the field to work with, the rows in between the panels, which, as you point out, is the kind of tabula rasa now for a entirely new field of human endeavor that we're calling by the clunky name of agrovoltaics. But it's people should work on a better name. But it's beautiful. A solar farm produces not just electrons, it produces shade. And on an overheating planet, shade is actually quite an asset. The Chinese have put a lot of these out in the desert. As you know, the desert in China has been expanding dramatically. It's a huge problem, the growing desert, the Gobi. This is the first thing that slowed that down because it's retaining enough moisture beneath those panels that the kind of biotic crust that eventually grows on desert sand actually has a chance to grow there. And so it's anchoring the desert in place. In Vermont, we've been growing lots and lots of pollinator attracting flowers and weeds in those spaces. And the number of pollinating insects has increased about 100 times on those fields compared with what was there before,
Wow.
which means that the fields around, fruit set in the orchards and stuff is up 30–40%, because there's just filled with insects. So we're, taking some bite out of the biodiversity crisis at the same time as the climate one. So I love the idea that this is all about that there's ample room here for creativity. Uh, you know, there's not much room for creativity with coal and gas and oil, and there's not much room for creativity with monoculture agriculture either. But this is this is a new piece of terrain that human ingenuity and wit can go to work on.
So yeah, I love that you took it to creativity, Bill, because my next question had to do with the fact that, it won't surprise you, we have a lot of clergy who are on this call and who will be reviewing this Zoom tape, when we're over here. And I hardly need to tell you that we clergy have a sacred responsibility to deliver a message to our gathered faithful. So, what advice would you give to clergy who are being viewed by their congregations as trusted messengers? What advice would you give them as they discern how they might address the climate crisis from their pulpit these days?
Well, I think that, I mean, we know a lot of the ways, of course, to talk about the climate crisis, and it's the deepest challenge to uh, the uh, Old Testament notion that we're supposed to be stewards of the earth. If we're supposed to be stewards, we're really bad at it because the temperature is going through the roof. And it's obviously for those of us who are Christians, it's a deep challenge to the gospel idea that one is supposed to love one's neighbors. We're drowning our neighbors and sickening our neighbors and making it impossible for them to grow food where they've always done it and so on. Um, so that stuff is really important and, beautifully illustrated in things like Francis's encyclical on climate. The new part of this, I think, is this possibilities around emerging energy. Now that the cheapest way to make power on this earth is to point a sheet of glass at the sun, we also can start talking about how we make energy affordable for poor people. We can talk about how there's 700 million people, mostly in Africa, who have no electricity at all, and this is clearly the way that they're going to get it, and we can help that happen. We can talk a lot about the things I was talking about, the fact that this is one way to stand up both to kind of war and oligarchy, as long as we depend on a fuel source that's only available in a few places, the people who to control those places are going to end up with way too much wealth and power, which they then systematically abuse. Um, so my mantra for all of this, as you know, because we put it on a T-shirt for all this, is just energy from heaven, not from hell.
Right.
When I was over at the Vatican last month to talk about all this with, the at the celebration of the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, I was sharing that line with people, and people were enjoying it mightily. It became one of the kind of watchwords of this wonderful conference.
No surprise there. So something we haven't said much about, and I want to invite your comments about the fact that Third Act is focused on two crises, not just the climate crisis, but also the crisis in our democracy. And if you could just say a few things about how these two crises are related to one another.
Sure.
I think you just started to get
Sure.
at it in what
Yeah,
you were just saying.
absolutely. I mean, those questions around oligarchy, and you could switch the words around a little bit and call it oilgarchy, are very real. You'll recall that it was last year that candidate Trump told the fossil fuel industry that if they gave him $1 billion, he'd give them anything they wanted. And they gave him a lot of money, and he's made good his promise. Um, um, you know, um, and so fossil fuel is the definition of an undemocratic energy system, easy to control centrally by a few people. It's exactly the opposite for sun and wind. And now batteries, which make up the kind of technological trinity here. Um, uh, 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 they're available to everyone, everywhere. And that's liberating news for people all over the place. 80% of our brothers and sisters live in countries that are net importers of fossil fuel. So for them, it's an extraordinary economic drain. When we talk about poor countries being in a balance of payments crisis, or having a deficit shock, or the IMF comes in and imposes austerity on them and things. Usually, a huge part of the reason is that they're spending what dollar capital they have buying the next boatload of oil, to keep their economy running. And that's why it's so wonderful to imagine country after country. I'm thinking about this, of course, especially tonight, because we should have in prayer our brothers and sisters in Jamaica who are going through something tonight different than probably any other humans have ever gone through. It looks like Hurricane Melissa was the strongest hurricane in the history of the Atlantic, the lowest barometric pressure that we've ever seen. And it hit the poorest part of that island with the flimsiest structures. I'm terrified to see what it looks like tomorrow when the sun comes up. But as we rebuild it, uh, and I put a bunch of links in my newsletter today about, I do this free newsletter every week, about relief, where to send relief money. When we rebuild it, at least we have the opportunity now to rebuild it in a way that will allow people to rely on the sun and the wind instead of having to try and constantly impoverish themselves to pay for Texas
Indeed.
or Saudi Arabia for some more oil or gas.
So, Bill, we're not going to have time to get to a lot of the questions, but Kathleen does have one question that was written in. Kathleen, do you want to go to that question, and then I'll have a final invitation for your final comment. Bill, go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So Leela Lowe wrote in the chat, and we talked about this right before we came on. Do either of you have a reaction to the climate memo released by Bill Gates this morning? We're wondering how you think it might affect climate efforts.
I'm afraid that Bill Gates is accommodating himself to the new political dispensation. And like all the other, truthfully, I don't understand it. You would think that the people who would be most able to stand up to power were people who had a spare $100 billion in their pocket. But it seems to be just the opposite. That they have been the absolute first to crack, and you know, so and of course, Microsoft is deeply engaged in the project of building AI data centers. So it's inconvenient for him to, all that aside, I mean, look, I mean, time to stop listening to billionaires about everything. They don't give great advice, is my thinking. If you're interested, I reviewed Bill Gates' last book for the New York Times Book Review. It's easy to find the review, and you'll get a sense of where I think he's gone wrong in thinking about these things even before today.
I remember that review, Bill, and I would just draw a double underline under Bill's suggestion that if you're interested to go to that link. So, Bill, I know you have to go to another event, but I've got just one thing last for you to comment on. So, Sunday was great, no surprise. The second No King's Day was even bigger than the first one. What's next?
Well, I mean, we're going to have to stay in the streets, and we're already talking with everybody at Indivisible and things about what the next, big action like that looks like. Though it's, always worth remembering that weather is a part of organizing, and it may be spring before the next huge gathering quite like that. But look, the reason that we're doing all this in part is because we know that there's a midterm election on the horizon. We know that there's altogether too high a chance that it may be, if it goes badly, may be the last election of its kind that we get to fight. Already, obviously, they're making strenuous efforts to undemocratize that election, which we need to stand up to. And then we need to be prepared in serious ways to turn out the vote and to be, deeply engaged. Third act before the last election, we have this pack now, gray pack. And we did the Silver Wave tour out in crucial places. I imagine we'll be seeing some of the same as the year goes on. I think that third act will play a crucial role here because I think that one of the places where the Trump administration is the weakest is in people's sense that they're, I don't know quite what the right word is, just abnormal, um, um, different from everything that's come before. And because we're older, we have a stronger sense of what came before and how weird it is. I mean, look, we're all acting the way that we normally do, and I am certainly in some ways, but we're doing it in a world where the President of the United States put out a video of him wearing a crown and flying an airplane over Americans while he defecated on them. Um, I, you know, we have to figure out the vocabulary for getting across to everyone in America that this is just it's not just wrong. It's not just, it's strange and needs to be stopped, you know. So I think we have a particular role to play here, and everybody should be thinking hard about what words, what images, what ideas will be best able to communicate all that. I apologize for having to run. I'm giving a big talk here in Boston in 20 minutes. But it's what a pleasure to get to spend this time with you all. And just God bless everybody, and we'll see you before long.
Great to see you, Bill. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Bye.
So I think we can go ahead. Does anyone have questions for Jim? We can certainly hang on to him for a while longer. And
And I'm glad to respond to whatever questions you might have.
if anyone wants to raise their hand, we're a small enough group, you could raise your hand. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Yes, Catherine, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm not gonna show my video. I'm ill and
No
a
worries.
mess. But the one question I joined a little late. Unfortunately, my alarm didn't go off or I slept through it. Who knows? The question I had wanted to ask Bill, and I'm happy to ask you guys, is the issue of what do we do with these new batteries that we're using in EVs that end up being substantially toxic. And I don't think, from everything that I've been reading, and I read a lot, maybe not enough, but I read as much as I can from many different sources, we haven't figured out how to deal with them. It's like every time humans make something new, it's almost impossible to foresee the environmental impact from that new product. And EV batteries are new. And what I have been reading is sort of dire warnings that they're pretty toxic. And I'm just wondering, has anybody thought about, discussed, taught? I mean, what's going on in terms of how do we address this new toxicity from something that is supposed to be making our environmental impact better?
So, Catherine, that's a great question. And Bill would have a more technical answer than I have, but I can provide the outline to the response. Almost everything you said is true. What is, in addition to what you have said, is that there are, over the past 3 to 5 years, new companies that are really growing to become enterprises that are going to take old batteries, particularly from cars, but from home batteries as well, and find ways to utilize more than 95% of the various components necessary to create a large battery. The battery loses its capacity to charge, but then when it can be broken back down into its ingredients, those ingredients are still capable of being reused in a newer battery to sort of live a second life or a third life or a fourth life.
Regenerative, basically continuing. Okay, thank you. That's great news. The obvious question that comes up in response to that is, where are these companies getting their funds? And if government funds are non-existent, or if there is pressure brought to bear to shut down contributions out of penalties or silencing, then what?
Yeah, in our capitalist society, it will be necessary, not optional, but necessary to make companies like that profitable.
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
Thanks,
Mary
Catherine.
Burton, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to say that Bill was too modest to mention it, but if you haven't seen the talk he gave on the Lexington Green, look it up. It's just fabulous. It was sent to me, and it's a terrific, particularly for your friends who know some history, but maybe even more so for the ones who don't.
Mary, I couldn't agree with you more. I sent that link out to all the Third Act Faith Coordinating Committee, as well as others and others and others. And if people don't know, Bill was raised in Lexington, Massachusetts. When he was 10 years old, he was giving tours of the beginning of the Revolutionary War there. And he brought all of that knowledge to bear in his 10.5-minute talk. In my estimate, it was among the best 10.5 minutes I have ever heard from anyone. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
All
Can
I'll say is
you
I'm going to
put
try and
that-
find that link again. Sharon, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask if we could have the link. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually just put in the chat. We will send the link to, oh, I see Leila has done that. Thank you. Also the link to his review of Bill Gates' book and his latest newsletter that has the links where you can send hurricane relief. So we'll get all that out with an email and the recording of the meeting after it's over.
May I ask one more question? I
Sure.
apologize. I'm feeling greedy tonight. This is in line, I think, somewhat of my previous question, and that is the concern about the explosion in rare earth metal mining and using those metals. I don't know how much of those metals are used in the batteries that are used for EVs and for whatever else we might be considering new green energy sources. But I certainly have a concern that it's completely unregulated, and I'm just afraid it's going to become yet another horrendous nightmare for us to deal with.
So
and we don't have that much time.
I think you're absolutely right that the potential for it to become a horrendous nightmare for us to deal with, you know, on the other end of its initial utilization is there. So I don't want to push back on that at all. That potential is there. However, it turns out the amount of extraction, oftentimes this concern is put in terms of, well, you have fossil fuel extraction over here, and most everybody in this conversation would label that as currently unnecessary and maybe evil. And then you have the extraction of rare minerals, which are necessary to go forward. It's all extraction. And, you know, if you're going to be cynical about it, you can stop the conversation there. But it turns out the amount of extraction necessary to actually run the world on solar or wind, the amount of extraction is less than 0.1% of what we are now extracting in terms of oil, gas, and coal.
I'm so relieved to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah,
And if I can throw one more thing in.
There's really no comparison.
Yeah, I put another quote in the chat from Bill's book that really stood out to me. I'm from West Virginia, so I'm very familiar with the coal mining industry, which is, quote, regulated. That the amount of metals, refined metals that are needed to reach net zero by 2050, and at which point we can then recycle them, probably for the rest of the time we will need them. The amount needed for that will add up to less than the amount of coal mined in 2023 alone.
Oh,
So
there it is.
Not that either of them is good, but
it's
far
not
less invasive than continuing to burn coal and fossil.
So we don't have to think of it as another nightmare that's right on our doorstep.
No.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You've got your hand up. You're on mute.
There we go. Just a couple of comments and I guess a question. I'd love to hear your take on this, Jim. And I only wish that Bill were still here, but we might be able to extrapolate some of what he would have to say about this. Just this week, the head of the UN, and before the next round of climate talks begins, said very, very straightforwardly that we've done too little too late on reducing emissions, and that the 1.5 degrees Celsius target is not doable he said possibly if we do a bunch of stuff by the end of the century, but a bunch of course, the damage will be done by then. I think it's really important for us in our work to remember that, you know, every little bit that we can keep it as close to that as we can is better than blowing way past it and way past it and way past it. But it's very sobering, and I think puts everything going on, not only with the fight for a sustainable climate, but everything going on with the fight for democracy in perspective. And the other thing that's tied to that, I have not read all of Bill Gates' statement yet. I read enough of it to kind of get a sense of it. And it struck me, I'm sure that he should be embarrassed, I would think, today too. Part of it was, you know, most of us will be okay. It's going to affect like really poor people, but most of us will be okay.
Exactly.
I think today with Jamaica having this catastrophic hurricane hitting it is to just sort of say, well, you know, I'm still okay where I am. That strikes me as particularly callous and against every teaching of every major religion in the world. So I'd love to see us carry some of that forward as and in our work. Just that I think it blows up what, you know, it really emphasizes what you and Bill were saying about oligarchy versus democracy and not letting billionaires run things. So anything you want to add to that, Jim?
Well, you've said it very well. You know, this is the world that we are in now, both feet, and we are heading toward a world where this is even more so. As people in this call may know, that 80% of the billionaires in America have underground shelters larger than 10,000 square feet. And it relates to what you're talking about, Betsy. Every world religion focuses on our obligation to care for the least of these among us. And fortunately, we are in a world where wherever you are, you know, as part of this Zoom, you know exactly what's going on. Well, not exactly, but you know plenty enough about what's going on in Jamaica right now. And our capacity to care for the least of these among us who are being devastated by that hurricane, it's ours to engage as a consequence of the internet and electronic funds and everything like that. We actually have what the world needs in order to throw the switch. This is why you know, Bill did, you know, once again this extraordinary thing, you know, starting out a year or a little more than a year ago to write this book about the sun, and then to focus our efforts on Sunday as a celebration. It's that's the positive side of it. And Betsy, your question about it is the burden which that positive side has to overcome. Yeah.
So great conversation. I'm jumping in because we're close to being out of time. This was scheduled for just an hour, and Ace has some things to share with y'all, stuff that's coming up, and I'm going to add the links to the chat. So Ace, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you. Really great conversation, and one that we should have a lot. So I want to thank Jim, of course, and if Bill was here, for your conversation and your keeping us moving forward with hope and grit. What we want to share with you tonight is, and I have in mind, so your segue was great, Jim, to the world religions, because Third Act Faith has a unique place in the Third Act global or domestic, I guess, circle. And our place is to really think about how people of faith who are so well organized in so many places in our country can stand up on behalf of both climate and the democracy. And to that end, I want to let you know about a new 3-part series that Third Act Faith is starting on November 18th at 7 p.m. All of this is going to be both in the chat, and if you're subscribing to Third Act Faith, you will get this information also through the newsletter in Third Act Faith. So make sure you're a subscriber. It's for free, and it will give you a lot of our resources and what's going on. But I'm going to tell you very briefly about November 18th because we'd love to see as many of you as possible at this series. The series itself will focus on the importance of friendship in building interfaith coalitions such as ours from different faith communities and spiritual seekers on behalf of our planet and our democracy. And so in our very first meeting on November 18th, we are going to begin with a short film, and I'll just give you the title because it says it all. God Between Us, a rabbi, a swami, a cardinal, 2 archbishops, and a Muslim imam. As the person focused on, Rabbi Alon Goshen Gottstein, describes the essential role of friendship in building interfaith understanding and cooperation. That film that night will be followed with a really great panel that includes Kosin Gregory Snyder, Reverend Cameron Trimble, and Imam Jamal Rahman. I actually heard 2 of the 3 already speak elsewhere, and they're just full of inspiration and help us fuel ourselves, no pun intended, as we move forward into this work. And participants after the end of the film and the panel will have a chance to speak with each other about the kinds of interfaith projects you can do in your local communities. So please register for that. Still in November, actually before November 18th, November 11th, we will have a sacred listening circle, and November 13th, a coffee clutch. A listening circle is contemplative and meditative to help us gather our wits and our strength. I'm not sure, I see Martin somewhere on this list tonight, and we didn't get a chance.
I'm here.
Okay, Martin, just give us a quick sentence about the sacred listening.
The Sacred Listening Circle is a lightly facilitated opportunity for us to share with one another our experience of what is happening in these times.
That is wonderful. Thank you. And on November 13th, during the day, there will be a coffee clutch, we're calling it. No structure, no organization, just show up with a cup of coffee, tea, or water and start talking to whoever else shows up for an informal gathering with each other to talk about the state of the world. Going back to the series that we've been speaking about, so after November 18th, we will have a wonderful opportunity January 27th to continue this series in interfaith friendship, and then on February 24th. And again, the details will be found in emails and in our newsletter, so make sure you're a subscriber to Third Act Faith. And finally, I want to share with you, because I'm personally really excited about this, on the 24th of February, Bishop Marion Buddy will be our speaker, possibly with a few others. We haven't finalized the whole program, but she has confirmed that she will be with us. And if you don't know who she is, she's an incredible person and a real role model for all of us. So I urge you to come to all of that and just find Third Act Faith a place of faith and peacefulness and friendship. And I'll give it back to somebody, I think, Kathleen.
Sure, I'll take it back. We've got about 7 minutes left. We have a song to close things out. But since we've got an extra minute or two, Martin, you had a centering exercise prepared that we skipped because we had so little time with Bill. Would you like to do it now for us, perhaps?
I would be happy to, and I'll make it brief. I thought I might lead us in a very short meditation that is consistent with the conversation we heard a moment ago, and then close us with a poem. So let me invite you all for a moment to settle into your body and your space where you are right now. If you want to close your eyes, do that, or soften your gaze. And even though this is a short meditation, welcome the opportunity to just be present here now for this. not to have to bring anything with you from the previous part of your day, and not to have to worry for just this moment about what's coming next. Feel the weight of your body in your chair and recognize that your body is made from the sun. That the plants you eat and the animals you eat are created from photosynthesis powered by the sun's energy. Feel your breath entering your lungs and know that the oxygen that it puts into your blood came from trees using the sun's energy to take carbon into themselves and to put oxygen out into the atmosphere. Know that every aspect of your life is the result of this relationship we have as Earth with the sun that we circle. And listen to this poem by Mary Oliver. Why I Wake Early. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star, that just happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. And for those of us who are ending our days, we can say good evening and thank you to the sun. And thank you for all the energy it offers us and all the opportunity we have to use it to protect our planet and our species and other species.
Thanks, Martin. I'm glad we had the time to hear that. That was wonderful. And we have one last song to send everyone out with. Jane Ellen's going to share that. Thanks, folks, for coming. We'll see you again very soon, I hope.
Thank you.